Picture this. It's a Wednesday afternoon in Mexico City. The sun is blazing over the Zocalo, one of the largest city squares in the entire world, the beating heart of a nation of 130 million people. This is the same plaza where empires have risen and fallen, where revolutions were declared, where the air itself carries the weight of centuries. This is not a place that gets impressed easily. This is not a city that hands out its love to just anyone. And on this particular Wednesday, May 6th, 2026, something happened in that square that people are still struggling to put into words. There was no scheduled concert, no ticketed event, no formal guest list or elaborate preparation. Just a single announcement at a morning press conference, broadcast on national television, then handed to the internet to do what the internet does. And what the internet did in this case was set off a chain reaction that filled one of the world's most historic public squares with 50,000 people in a matter of hours. They came with light sticks. They came with handmade banners, painted in whatever language their hearts were speaking that afternoon. Some came from other cities. One fan later shared online that she had taken a 1 a.m. bus from another city with no plan, just a direction. They weren't waiting for a politician. They weren't waiting for a national ceremony. They were waiting for one person to step onto a balcony. And when he finally did, long blonde hair catching the afternoon light, wearing a perfectly tailored classic suit, carrying that unmistakable presence that no stylist designs and no training program manufactures, the sound that erupted from Zocalo Square was the sound of 9 years of waiting finally arriving all at once. That person was Jimin. And what happened in the 4 minutes that followed is exactly what we are going to break down today, because it was about a lot more than a balcony appearance. It was about what becomes possible when a fandom's love is patient enough and an artist is real enough that something truly historic can happen on a random Wednesday afternoon. To understand why this moment hit the way it did, you need to understand what it meant for BTS to even be in Mexico. Because the weight of this moment is completely inseparable from the history behind it. BTS last performed in Mexico in 2017, 9 years ago. And in those 9 years, the Mexican army grew, matured, organized, and waited. They watched BTS conquer stadiums across North America and Europe. They watched sold-out nights in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, London, and Paris. They watched ARMY and other Latin American countries celebrate concert announcements while they refreshed their own pages and saw nothing. The teenagers who first discovered BTS in middle school became young adults with jobs, apartments, and complicated schedules. Some of them had children of their own. And through all of it, the love did not diminish. If anything, it compounded. The way anything does when it's maintained against the current for long enough. There is something that happens to a fandom when the weight becomes generational. The connection deepens beyond casual interest into something closer to identity. When you've spent years representing a love that hasn't been physically reciprocated in your corner of the world, when you've had to explain to people why you're still invested, why it still matters, you build a kind of relationship with that thing that is fundamentally different from what casual fans feel. Mexican Army, by the time 2026 arrived, had that relationship in full. It was not passive or nostalgic. It was active, organized, and burning as hot as it had ever been. When the Arirang World Tour was announced in early 2026 and Mexico City appeared on the roster, the reaction was seismic. Not just excitement, release. The kind of collective emotional exhale that only happens when something you had stopped daring to hope for suddenly becomes real. Fans who had been holding back anticipation for years suddenly had permission to let it out all at once. Concert group chats that had been dormant for months lit up immediately. Countdown timers were set. Plans were made, rearranged, and made again. Ticket sales told the story in numbers. Over 2.1 million people attempted to purchase tickets for approximately 136,000 available seats across 3 nights. Ticketmaster's virtual queue crashed. Fans who had been preparing for months, payment information saved, browsers cleared, alarms set well ahead of the sale time, watched tickets disappear before their pages would even load. It was one of the most overwhelming ticket sales in Mexican music history, and the Mexico City Chamber of Commerce confirmed that the 3 sold-out nights at Estadio GNP Seguros were projected to generate $107.5 million for the local economy. A number that, on its own, communicates just how seriously Mexico was taking BTS's return. But even for the fans who didn't get tickets, The hundreds of thousands who were shut out and had resigned themselves to watching from home, May 6th was about to change everything. President Claudia Sheinbaum had extended a formal, official invitation to BTS as honored guests of the Mexican government. And on the morning of May 6th, she announced during her daily nationally broadcast press conference, calmly, conversationally, that BTS had arrived at the National Palace and would be appearing on the balcony to greet fans. She framed it simply and directly. Come if you want to see them. The announcement was almost casual. The response was anything but. Social media across Mexico detonated. Group chats exploded with all-caps messages. Plans were canceled. Across Mexico City, people started moving toward the Zocalo. The head of the city's government, Clara Brugada, later said, "The president made possible an unforgettable moment for thousands of army. The city deployed a full security operation in the surrounding area, something usually reserved for major state events, to manage the crowd that materialized with stunning speed." Inside the palace, meanwhile, BTS was receiving an experience that most visiting dignitaries never get. President Sheinbaum personally led all 7 members, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V and Jungkook, through the corridors and halls of the building. This was not a perfunctory official greeting in a conference room. This was a full guided tour by the head of state herself through one of the most historically significant buildings in the Americas. The National Palace contains Diego Rivera's sweeping murals depicting centuries of Mexican history, murals that art historians have called some of the most important works ever created in the Western Hemisphere. Its architecture is a layered record of 500 years, pre-colonial foundations beneath colonial stone beneath modern restoration. Walking those halls genuinely affected BTS. You could see it in the footage that emerged. The pauses, the upward glances, the quiet that comes over people when they encounter something that matters in a way they were not expecting. And then, in the inner gardens, came the moment that briefly broke an entirely different part of the internet. Sheinbaum mentioned that the palace grounds are home to 16 cats living there under official government protection. Jimin's reaction was immediate and completely unfiltered. He stopped walking. His eyes went wide. His smile arrived all at once, the full version, the one that closes his eyes at the corners and transforms his entire face. The video of him reaching toward the cats, openly delighted, briefly forgetting every formal context around him, became one of the most shared clips from the entire Mexico visit within hours of being posted. Non-fans saw it and were charmed. Fans who had known about his love of animals for years felt like they had witnessed something rare. A moment of pure, unmanaged joy from someone who is almost always performing at the highest level. It was deeply humanizing, and it reminded everyone watching exactly why Jimin's relationship with his audience operates at the depth it does. The formal portion of the visit concluded with BTS receiving the title of Distinguished Visitors of Mexico City, a commemorative plaque, and a signed vinyl record from the president. Sheinbaum later posted the group photo on her social media with the caption, "Music and values unite Mexico and South Korea." She also confirmed she had formally requested that BTS return in 2027. At approximately 5:06 in the afternoon, the doors to the palace balcony opened. J-Hope came out first, already radiating energy, and the crowd responded immediately, a wall of sound that rolled across the Zocalo and into the surrounding streets. Then, one by one, the rest followed, all 7 members in their coordinated navy and beige suits, visibly overwhelmed by what was below them. Some leaned over the railing. Some made heart gestures. Some pulled out their phones to film the sea of people, the light sticks turning the square a shade of purple that the aerial footage captured with stunning clarity. RM addressed the crowd first in Spanish, "Los amo, los adoro. Muchas gracias." Then in English, "We can't wait for tomorrow's concert. Let's have a fun time together." V followed, speaking Spanish he had clearly practiced specifically for this moment. "I'm not good at Spanish, but I'll try. I've missed you. We've missed Mexico so much. The energy here is unbelievably amazing. I've already promised to come back next year." The crowd's response to that last sentence was thunderous. Jin and Jungkook leaned forward over the railing with wide, bright smiles. J-Hope threw both arms open, as if he was trying to embrace the entire city from a distance. Suga stood slightly back, watching everything with that characteristic quiet intensity. Indeed, then there was Jimin. There are moments in pop culture where you can describe every technical detail correctly and still miss the point entirely. What happened when Jimin stepped onto that balcony is one of those moments. But let's try. He stepped onto the balcony in a perfectly fitted classic suit. His blonde hair, which had already gone viral at Tokyo Dome weeks earlier, earning the nickname Rapunzelman from fans who couldn't believe how long and luminous it had grown through the first legs of a tour, fell past his shoulders and caught the afternoon sun in a way that every camera in the square immediately registered. He walked to the railing. He looked out at 50,000 people. And then he waved, calmly, warmly, without theatrical flourish, with the particular quality of presence that is the most disarming thing in the world when it comes from him specifically, the quality of someone who is completely present, completely genuine, and not performing any of it. The response from the square changed. Not just louder, the crowd had already been operating at stadium volume from the first moment the doors opened. But different in quality. Korean reporters covering the event noted that Jimin drew a distinct, separate wave of reaction from the crowd compared to his bandmates. Local television cameras lingered on his footage longer than the others, with anchors commenting on his visual presence and the particular noise that followed his appearance at the railing. And on Mexico's X trending charts, 2 hashtags dedicated specifically to Jimin climbed to the national top simultaneously. Welcome Jimin to Mexico and Bienvenido a Mexico Jimin. He was the only individual BTS member to trend separately in Mexico that day. This is the moment to discuss something that sounds like fandom hyperbole, but is, in fact, an observable and documented pattern. What gets called the Jimin effect. It has shown up throughout the Arirang tour at multiple stops, captured in footage covered by mainstream outlets, rather than just fan accounts. During the Tampa leg in April, BTS's first performances in the United States in nearly 4 years, clips circulated of security staff at the barricades, losing their carefully maintained composure when Jimin moved past them. In one video, a guard who had held a perfectly professional demeanor through the entire opening of the show simply broke into a wide, unavoidable smile the moment Jimin knelt near the edge of the stage. The clip was viewed millions of times and discussed in articles about the Arirang tour's cultural impact. This pattern is not isolated to one venue or one type of audience. It happens at every stop. It happens with fans and with non-fans. It happens with people who came ready to be moved and people who arrived just doing their job. The reason for it is genuinely difficult to explain in purely rational terms, which is, perhaps, the most honest thing you can say about it. Jimin trained in contemporary dance before joining BTS, and contemporary dance is a discipline built entirely around the communication of authentic emotional states through physical movement. Not performance for its own sake, communication. When he is on stage, or standing at a balcony railing, there is intention behind every physical detail. When he makes eye contact with someone in a crowd of 50,000, that person registers it as a personal moment. This is not a trick or a technique. It is, by all available evidence, simply what happens when someone with his particular combination of training and natural temperament is present with an audience. In Mexico, every element of the Jimin effect was amplified by context. These were not casual fans at a general admission show. These were people who had maintained a deep, active love for 9 years without the physical reinforcement of a live performance in their country. When they saw him standing there, actually, physically present in Mexico City, waving at them from the balcony of their own country's most important building, what happened in that crowd was not just excitement. It was recognition. It was the moment that everything they had invested emotionally for 9 years was confirmed as real. After the balcony appearance, Jimin picked up his phone and turned the camera toward the square below. He recorded what he was seeing. 50,000 people still gathered in the Zocalo, still holding their lights up, the square still purple in the late afternoon. Then he posted the video to his Instagram stories with 2 words, Mexico, gracias heartsuit. That was the complete post. Nothing more. And the response to those 2 words spread around the world almost immediately. Not just through fan accounts, but through Mexican news outlets, Latin American media, international pop culture coverage. Because those 2 words, written in Spanish, in the language of the people who had been standing below him, communicated something that no press release could manufacture. He was moved. He wanted them to know. He wanted them to see exactly what he had seen from that balcony. One Mexican fan who hadn't managed to get concert tickets shared their story online. She had taken a 1 a.m. bus from another city, stood in the Zocalo for hours in the heat, and watched Jimin appear on that balcony without a ticket and without any guarantee of anything beyond a few minutes of being in the same city at the same time. "I thought I wasn't going to see BTS at all," she wrote, "but I got something better. I'll never forget that moment for the rest of my life. That is not the language of entertainment consumption. That is the language of something that mattered at a deeper level." Let's pull back and look at the full picture, because this moment carries implications well beyond a memorable balcony appearance. What BTS received in Mexico was not a standard celebrity welcome. The president personally guided them through her official residence. They received formal diplomatic honors in one of the most historically significant government buildings in the Americas. They stood on the same balcony from which Mexican national history has been shaped and proclaimed. And 50,000 ordinary citizens came, not because they were organized, ticketed, or compensated, but because they wanted to be there. Those are the defining elements of a state-level cultural moment, not a promotional event. This is what Korean cultural power looks like in 2026. Sheinbaum said explicitly that encounters like this strengthen the bilateral relationship with South Korea. The city's leadership framed the day in terms of giving young Mexicans a moment of joy, language typically reserved for civic events of genuine significance. The projected $107.5 million economic impact across 3 concert nights was cited alongside projections about long-term tourism and cultural exchange that extend well beyond a single tour stop. These are the conversations that happen when governments take culture seriously as a dimension of international relations. BTS has always existed at this intersection, between entertainment and diplomacy, between art and identity, between the deeply individual and the genuinely collective. What happened in Mexico was one of the clearest expressions of that intersection the world has seen so far. And Jimin, standing on that balcony with his blonde hair and his calm, genuine presence, embodied it in a way that felt both completely natural and quietly historic. 4 minutes. That's roughly how long the balcony appearance lasted, shorter than most BTS songs. The time it takes to scroll through a few pages on your phone, or wait for a pot of water to boil. And in those 4 minutes, 50,000 people who had been waiting 9 years got something they will tell stories about for the rest of their lives. Jimin stepped onto a presidential balcony in Mexico City in a classic suit with long blonde hair. He looked out at 50,000 people, and he waved. And 50,000 people, carrying 9 years of waiting, having shown up without tickets, having stood in the afternoon heat for hours for just this, waved back and screamed back and held their lights up until the whole square turned purple. When it was over, he posted 2 words on Instagram. México, gracias corazón negro naipes. That's the whole story. And it is also everything, because packed inside those 2 words and those 4 minutes is the entire arc of what BTS is, what Jimin is, and what the relationship between an artist and their audience becomes when both sides show up for it, consistently, over years and across distances that should make it impossible. The Arirang World Tour will keep going. More stadiums, more sold-out nights, more moments that make the highlight reels. But this one, the blonde prince on the balcony of the National Palace, the sea of purple below him, the 2 words posted to Instagram from someone who has never, not once, taken the love given to him for granted. This one belongs to Mexico. And it belongs to the 50,000 people who showed up with nothing but faith and got everything. Mexico, gracias. And thank you, Jimin, for all of it. Drop a comment below and tell me if you were there. I want every single detail. And if you watch this from somewhere else in the world, share it with someone who needs to see what real connection looks like between an artist and the people who love their work. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.